Hi, I'm Marangella from Vertex Effects, aka the Rig Doctor, and today we're going to find out which patch cable for your pedal board actually sounds the best. Now, in order to figure out which cable actually sounds the best on the pedal board, we've brought in some of the most popular brands of cable from many different manufacturers, and we're going to be shooting them out together. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our setup is like today and why you might want to choose one brand over the other. And we're going to, in fact, involve some of our favorite YouTubers, give them these cables blindly. They're going to listen to them through their own setups, and I'm going to have them give you their choices and what they prefer most with Les Pauls or with Strats, through clean amps and through high gain amps, so you'll get a little bit of a distribution of all the different opinions, and I'll also give my opinion on what I think sounds best and why I might choose one cable over the other at the end. Now again, this is not a comparison of the cable going from the guitar into the pedal board or from the pedal board to the amp. We're really spending our time today investigating the cables that would ordinarily go on your pedal board. So these are all the interconnections between each one of your pedals. Now to simulate this today, I have 30 feet of every major brand of cable. I have the Canary GS4, I have the George L, I have the Mogami 2314, the Evidence Monorail, the Lava Tightrope, the Mogami 2319, and a Bestronix patch cable. These all range in different capacitances. These all range in different electrical specs. Some of them have braided shields, some of them have spiral shields, some of them solid core, some of them are stranded. Now, what I have going on is I'm going to start with the Les Paul, and I also have a Strat that we're going to use interchangeably so we can hear it through both types of instruments. It's then going into a Loop Master loop switcher, and then following that I have the 7 different cables, 30 feet each, same exact connectors, all made the same. Following that I have dedicated to a foot switch so we can bring those in and out one at a time. I have a 10-foot Mogami cable going into the input of this Loop Master, and I have 2 10-foots going out of it, one to each one of the amps I'm going to be using today, which is a 2-Rock Studio Pro 35, and then a Marshall JVM, which is going to be doing my dirty sounds. The 2-Rock is for the cleans. Same mics on both amplifiers, so we're trying to keep those filters as consistent as possible and really just hear the differences between the cables, keeping everything else exactly the same. So in even doing this comparison, what's the real point? Well, to me, the point is that as somebody who's building rigs, you always want to be able to get the closest sound you can to your reference, which to me is always a 10-foot guitar cable plugged directly into the amplifier with nothing in between. And what we're attempting to do today is figure out which one of these cables is going to get us closest to that. So here's how the process is going to work. I'm going to play something clean on the Les Paul, and that's going to go through the 2-Rock, and then I'm going to go to something dirty on the Les Paul, and that's going to go through the Marshall. I'm going to play it with each one of the cables. We're going to record all those, and again, I'm going to give you all those recordings so you can download those WAV files and you can compare them yourself in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever system you use. And you can actually identify for yourself if you notice any appreciable differences. I'm going to try to play exactly the same thing. I understand that is somewhat of a variable, but this is just to give us the closest representation, again, through a clean amp and a dirty amp, playing roughly the same exact thing to see what these actually sound like. So I'm going to start first with the clean amp, then I'm going to go to the dirty amp, switch guitars, and repeat with the same cable, and then we'll switch to the next one. Here we go. So first off, clean reference with the Les Paul.
So for the Les Paul, for the clean, I like sound number 1 overall because I like the overall clarity, and then it didn't seem like it was too bass heavy.
For the clean Les Paul, it was a tie between cables 3 and 5.
Okay, so for the Les Paul clean, I think I liked cable 1 the best. It had the most top-end presence, at least to my ears.
So for the Les Paul clean, I went for number 3. It was toss-up between 2, 3, and 4, but I went for number 3 in the end.
For the clean Les Paul, honestly, cable 1 sounded just the most open.
For the Les Paul clean, I preferred cable number 6.
But number 1 was brighter and clearer to me. It was less muddy.
Honestly, on the Les Paul Clean, I liked cable 1 the best, and cable 7 was my second favorite.
For the dirty Les Paul, once again, number 1 sounds the cleanest to me.
The Les Paul Dirty, I prefer cable number 7.
For the Les Paul Dirty, I went for number 2. Again, it was between 2 and 3, but I went for number 2.
Les Paul Dirty Tone is the same cable.
When it came to the dirty, I like cable number 2.
I'm going to go with cable 3. Now, in my ears, there's not a huge difference from cable 2 all the way to cable 7. They're all sort of in the same ballpark to me.
I liked cable 1 absolutely the best on the Les Paul.
Les Paul Dirty, I actually preferred cable 4.
All right, now we're going to repeat, go through the same order, starting again with the clean reference.
For the clean Strat, I really actually preferred cable 4 and 5 and 7, which I know isn't giving you one answer.
For the Strat Clean, I prefer cable number 5.
For the Strat Clean, I went for number 2. It was a toss-up between 2 and 4.
For the Strat Clean, I choose the number 4.
When it came to the Strat, I liked cable number 4. For the clean,
There's actually a tie between cable 3 and 5.
All right, so for the clean Strat, it's between cable 4 and cable 5 for me. They're very, very, very close.
7 and 4. I don't know. It's hard to decide.
For the dirty Strat, I really found these all very similar, but this time cable 5 actually stood out to me. It just seemed to have a good balance.
I liked 7 and 4 the best for the Strat.
For Strat Dirty, I prefer cable number 6.
For the Dirty Strat, it was a toss-up between 2, 3, and 5, and I went for 5, my favorite Dirty Strat tone from those cables.
Stratocaster Dirty. Same number 4.
for the dirty, I like cable number 3.
For this one, I'm going to have to just say it's probably going to be 4 again. Again, the differences between cables 2 and cable 7 to me were so minimal that it's hard to tell.
For the dirty Strat, it was a tie between cables 3 and 5.
So that was the distribution of what some of our favorite YouTubers thought about which cables they preferred over others. Now, irrespective of what their choices were, really, these are all things that are a matter of taste. Every cable is going to have a sound. There's no such thing as a completely neutral cable. Some are going to exaggerate the high end, some of them are going to exaggerate the low end, some of them might exaggerate the mids. And it kind of depends on what you're looking for, might help you determine what cable to choose. But I want to throw another curveball at you that you may not have considered. The quality of your buffer actually greatly impacts the cable sound. And it can do so in a way where maybe it makes the differences between all cables pretty negligible. But we're going to put that to the test today because I have the buffer in my Vertex boost, which is wired in the beginning of the signal path before we get into any of the patch cables, which has a very high quality buffer, a 1 meg input impedance, and a little under 100 ohm output impedance. And then I have a Boss TU2, which is a common buffer that people will use on their pedal boards that is much more available than the Vertex Boost and ubiquitous in the marketplace. This also has a 1 meg input impedance, but has a much higher output impedance, which is less desirable. It has a 1K output impedance, so much higher than the Vertex Boost. So there's quite a big difference in its ability to drive any capacitance on the output, but we're gonna see if that actually translates on the pedal board and whether we hear any of that. So here's the clean Les Paul. It's going through the 2-rock, and this is just seeing, just the cable capacitance from the guitar going into the amp. It's a nice sound, but let's see what happens if we add in the lava. We know that it's gonna have more roll off because you're adding in 30 more feet of cable. You can hear an appreciable difference between the two. Again, here's with none of the 30 feet involved. Lava involved. Definitely rolls off quite a bit of high end. But let's see what happens if we take even the Boss tuner and just using that as a buffer. How much does that bring back our top? Off. Boss tuner back in. Even a low quality buffer in the Boss, a standard BJT flip-flop buffer, can pretty well transform the capacitance of even 30 feet of cable that's rolling it off. Now let's see if we hear any real difference with the Vertex Boost. Just see if that does anything. Off. Let's bypass the whole thing. Go back to the Vertex Boost. Go to the Boss tuner. Then no buffer at all. So you can hear that there's pretty drastic differences once the buffers are added into the equation. It almost completely eliminates any of that roll-off. And even though I noticed a slight bit of difference between the Vertex Boost and the Boss had a little bit more roll-off. And again, with a 1K output impedance, it's going to struggle to drive along lines, where with the Vertex Boost or similarly built buffers like the Mesa Boogie Highwire or the True Tone or the Bonafide buffer, any of the buffers I talk about and being in that specification of having a 1 meg input impedance and 100 ohm output impedance, this is driving that with no problem and sounds to me closer to the bypass tone. So if I involve the Vertex Boost again, and then I bypass the boost and the 30 feet of cable, and I'm just going directly into the amp. That to me is much closer than this, which is the Boss buffer. There's definitely a little bit more roll-off, not a huge amount, but the boost is definitely closer, brings back more of that high end, and you have to remember that even in the bypass sound, I'm still getting the cable going back to the amplifier, and when I involve the buffer, it's actually eliminating that cable capacitance. So really the only capacitance I'm seeing is what the guitar is plugging into when it goes into the loop master. So that's just some food for thought. Let's just leave the Vertex Boost on, and let's just toggle through a couple of these different cables and even see if we notice much of a difference. Let's try the GS4, that was the lava. That's sounding actually pretty close to me. Let's bring in the George L. Go back to the lava. Let's bring in the Mogami 2314, which is what I like to use a lot on rigs. Let's go to the lava, back to that. They really are all sounding the same. Let's bring in the evidence. Same thing. And let's just see if it holds true for the 2319. Really the same thing. Let's try Bestronix. I'm really noticing very little difference between cable 1 and cable 2, or frankly any of the cables that we're comparing them A/B when you're using a high quality buffer like the Vertex Boost. But let's see if the Boss Tuner holds up the same. Does it actually represent the same sound no matter what cable we're using? Let's see. Back to the GS4. I would say there is a little bit of difference here that I'm noticing in the top end, but let's see if that's just my imagination. Let's go to the George L. Or let's bring in the 2314. I'm kind of hearing a little bit of low end difference there. The Lava actually sounds a little bit tighter, whereas I'd say that the 2314 kind of has a little bit more flub. I'm already hearing differences between the cables on the Boss TU2. Now that doesn't mean that the Boss TU2 is a terrible buffer. It just means that it's not as good at maintaining the neutrality of the rig the more cable capacitance that's seen on the output. Now all these have different cable capacitance specs, and so they're all going to be a little different in that regard. But when you have a high quality buffer like the Vertex Boost or some of the other ones that we talk about all the time on the channel, it sort of normalizes this difference. So you could literally have any one of these patch cables of your choosing, and it would pretty much sound the same or within a very small percentage difference between any of the other ones. So it really doesn't matter anymore which ones you use. So this is a little food for thought that you might want to consider, again, when you're deciding what patch cables you want. And maybe you don't need that $5 a foot patch cable, and you might be just fine with Mogami 2314, which is, around 50 cents a foot and certainly well under $1 versus some of the other ones. Again, you can all get these to sound good. It's just going to require high quality buffers, and the lower quality buffer that you use, the more that the quality of the cable is going to matter, and you're going to want to go with the lowest possible cable capacitance. So that was our patch cable shootout. Again, this is something that I've been wanting to show you for a long time, and many of you guys have asked about this. How do I choose the cable that is going to go on my pedal board? Is that any different than the cable that would go from my guitar into my pedal board or from my pedal board for the amp? The answer is yes, because this is a different environment. The pedal board is a low impedance environment, and the higher quality buffer you have, the less the patch cable matters. You have one like I'm recommending, input and output buffer, and here we're just using one buffer because again, we're not competing with any other pedals and their impedances to get back to the amplifier. So one is a decent enough application for this particular rig. So that was our cable shootout. You got to hear how everything sounded, clean through a 2-rock amplifier, dirty through a Marshall amplifier. You got to hear it with a Les Paul. You got to hear it with the Strat. You got to hear how buffers influence the cable and actually sort of nullify the cables depending on which cable and which buffer you used. And if you had a higher quality buffer, it could actually completely eliminate differences between the pedals, almost to a fractional percentage of the difference. You've also heard what YouTubers say. Some of our favorite YouTubers have weighed in on what they thought sounded best. Again, this wasn't with any signal conditioning, but if you're just treating the cable on its own and you're not considering using high quality buffers with your rig, this will at least give you a baseline, and then if you want to graduate to high quality, then probably any of our advice is just as good as anybody else's, because again, kind of normalizes the outcome of this whole entire test. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this showed you some things about the cables that you could be using on your rig. And really, I think the bottom line here is use the stuff that is easiest for you to assemble. I typically use Mogami 2314 because it's small. As you can see here, it sounds great. You put a great buffer in front of it, it sounds even better. And it really eliminates any differences between all these different cable brands. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to support what we're doing, there's multiple ways you can do this. I actually want to give away these cables. So if you leave a comment, you download this stuff, you listen to it, or you just listen to it on our video, tell us which one you like. I'm going to be giving away these 30 feet of cable. I'll leave my soldered ends on there, but you can chop this up any way you want. So leave us a comment. I will give away all 7 of these cables to people that are leaving comments of which ones they thought were best and why, so we can get these off our hands. I will ship them directly to you It doesn't matter where in the world that you live, so please feel free to do that. And if you want to support, we actually sell pre-made patch cables using the Mogami 2314. And if you want one-on-one consulting, or you just want to be part of the conversation beyond the scope of these videos, you can join us over on Patreon, where you have multiple different membership levels, or head to our website, buy one of our Vertex effects, like the boost that we used today, which has a great buffer in it. That all goes to help the cause. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella for Vertex Effects. See you later.